Valve's community has always been obsessed with early cut or unreleased content. This trend started back with the release of the original Half-Life, when, following its global success, fans discovered that originally they had a completely different game in production, and only after it evolved into what is now considered one of the most important titles in gaming history. That obsession grew stronger after the well-known Half-Life 2 beta leak, when a German self-taught hacker named Axel Gembe gained unauthorized access to Valve's servers and published the game's source code, an early build, online. He eventually received a 2-year probation, but this leak created an entire community dedicated to searching small bits of information and recreating the content from those early builds. On July 9, 2020, Jeff Keighley released an interactive book titled The Final Hours of Half-Life Alyx, detailing the game's development and what Valve had been working on before returning to the Half-Life universe. One chapter casually hinted that we might see a surprise in the future, which is related to a secret project that had been in development by a small team at Valve since 2018. If we go back to June 12, 2018, there was a reference to a project called Citadel hidden in a compiled DLL library for Dota 2. Over the following years, leaks about 3 Source 2 projects started to appear. Already mentioned Citadel, a Source 2 port of CSGO, and HLX, a new iteration of Half-Life 3. It was difficult to interpret the findings because all the leaks related to these projects appeared at the same time. It was clear that CSGO was a first-person shooter and HLX was another Half-Life game, but figuring out what Citadel is was way harder. If you'd like a full video about it, let me know in the comments, but in 2 words, it was some kind of multiplayer game set in the Half-Life universe. Then, in October of 2022, Valve registered a new trademark, Neon Prime. And shortly after that, a Twitter account called Play Neon Prime, similar to Play Artifacts, suddenly appeared. People were confused, cause this was now the 4th project, but without any mentions in the Source 2 engine. A year later, already after the launch of Counter-Strike 2, another name appeared. Shadowline, with its own Twitter account and a domain registered through SafeNames, a registrar often used by Valve and other corporate clients. And finally, on May 16, 2024, the public officially learned about Deadlock, a new third-person competitive hero-based shooter featuring 6 vs 6 teams, unique characters, massive maps, items, abilities, and fast movement between lines on floating rails. I got access the same day and stayed silent until Valve allowed public discussion. The Deadlock phenomenon deserves its own dedicated video, which I've been working on for over a year. But today I want to tell you how a community team worked in complete secrecy behind the scenes on a project that barely anyone could have imagined. But while you have skins and time, check out SkinsMonkey. Use code GABEN and get up to a $5 bonus. Select a few of your current skins, pick a new one in the same price range, and exchange your old and ugly CSGO items to something new and shiny from Counter-Strike 2. Use code GABEN and buy skins much cheaper with a 30 plus 5% top-up bonus. SkinsMonkey, links and my code down below. Valve are extremely protective of everything related to their unreleased content and tend to side-eye all the beta communities. But for some reason, since the start of Deadlock's closed testing in April 2024, the game's build has been stuffed with leftovers from old iterations of the game. Almost instantly, it became clear that Citadel, Neon Prime, Shadowline and Deadlock were different versions of the same evolving game. At one point, it actually took place in the Half-Life universe, and it can be easily proven by leftover assets, auto-generated minimaps, console commands, and configs, where the Sapphire and Amber team were originally mentioned as Combine and Rebels. To everyone's surprise, one of the key developers, Yoshi, released a short video of an early Citadel prototype. At the time, it was a first-person shooter filled with placeholder assets from other games. Half-Life's Antlions, Left 4 Dead's hands and weapons, Dota's sound effects, and so on. And after a brief research in the early Deadlock build, the community found a goldmine. Developers forgot to clean old maps, models, textures, sound effects, lore and character configs, basically everything from the previous major iteration called Neon Prime. They didn't even bother to remove in-game footage with actual gameplay videos and visual showcases. The community got around 6 minutes of pure material, each frame of which was dissected one by one. Quite obviously, this led to the first mods that were aimed at recreating everything that was found. Some studied cut abilities and characters, while others rebuilt UI, maps and fixed animations. Early on, it became clear that characters, abilities and items in Deadlock were just text-based configs, making it relatively easy to create new ones. As more mods popped up, the community decided to combine efforts, forming a single team to build a polished recreation called Primelock. It started as a fun experiment and evolved into a digital monument to one of Valve's most mysterious projects, one that almost became lost media. Since it was originally a mashup of separate mods, they had to piece everything together and run playtests to see how far Deadlock could be modified. Because the game lacks official modding tools, they had to Frankenstein various source 2 games together. Primelock runs on a year-old version that was chosen to synchronize tools and keep everything compatible. While the team enjoys original Deadlock, they feel that it takes too long to wait for certain updates. So in Primelock they aim to frequently iterate ideas and experiment with characters, items and abilities. Over time, Deadlock has diverged from the original Neon Prime, making Primelock feel even more distinct. A kind of time capsule showing what Neon Prime might have been if Valve had continued its development. Luckily, most original assets remained untouched. The team just filled in gaps, polished rough edges and added their own interpretations based on leftover textures, early gameplay and localization files. Some things were kept intact, some scraped from different parts and some made entirely from scratch using references in files or mentions in lore. For example, the character Akimbo had 0 visual references. They had only his lore, abilities, a few sound effects and voice lines, but this was enough to reconstruct a possible version of the hero. Or take Pestilence, a character with very rough development. According to a Valve dev on Discord, they hadn't even recorded his voice lines. But config files and textures were enough to resurrect him in the form of Plague Doctor. One of the toughest challenges was creating custom animations. With no official tools, Dirt Killer spent weeks reverse engineering anim graph logic from scratch. Besides that, some abilities just couldn't be recreated due to engine limitations. One of them is Tempest's ultimate, inspired by Zeus's ult in Dota, which hits every enemy on the map. But in Neon Prime you could avoid damage by hiding under a roof, so eventually they had to replace that and a few other abilities with something similar. Because the mod started as a mashup, it also includes some test characters who likely weren't part of Neon Prime. But since they were fully playable and had become community-beloved slorks, cutting them felt wrong. To avoid confusion, each character in Primelock includes development history and team commentary explaining differences from the original game and fun facts. They even rated how closely each hero matches their source material visually and mechanically. One major difference from Neon Prime is gameplay balance. The original game was slow and boring at times, so the team adapted Deadlock's current balance and economy to make the game feel more dynamic and fun. They even began developing custom game modes, and one of the most fleshed out was Generator Hunt, where teams destroyed each other's generators scattered across the map. In the end, it wasn't very fun, and custom modes turned out to be extremely challenging, especially with limited tools and resources. A key milestone was creating early matchmaking, and right now it works via a Discord bot. Players join queues, pre-pick heroes and get auto-assigned to teams and lines based on elo ratings. Each hero has stats for damage, utility and support to help with team balancing. The bot also tracks matches, favorite characters and important stats. If you don't want to use their system, you can still play with friends using Deadlock's server infrastructure, since technically you're still in the official client. Although early attempts started a year ago, actual development has only been going for about 6 months. The team kept it secret because it looked a bit rough, filled with placeholder assets, buggy characters and unfinished maps. They tested ideas with a small group and didn't want early impressions to define the project. Plus, they wanted to surprise the community, cause in their Discord there's a group of people that are obsessed with Neon Prime and they thought it'd be fun to drop a fully playable, polished mod out of nowhere. The installation process is pretty easy. First and foremost, you need Deadlock on your Steam account. If you still don't have it, someone with access must invite you through the main menu. Then join the Deadlock modding Discord server, download the year-old build from 2024 and drop the mod over the existing folder. Even if you can't join playtests, the mod plays amazing with bots and everything works flawlessly. The Primelock team plans to support the project as long as it stays relevant and fun for the community. But they are pretty limited unless Valve provides official modding tools like Dota Arcade, enabling custom modes with proper support. They even tried contacting Valve for approval, but got frog silence in return. They are also curious to learn more unknown details to make Primelock even closer to the original. Despite all this work, my very first tweet about Deadlock turned out to be true. Early internal playtests of Neon Prime were indeed received not very well, and people didn't like the heavy sci-fi style or the excessive neon. You played as neon heroes with neon powers on a night map filled with neon lights. And during long fights, it turned into a glowing mess that destroyed visibility. It appears that Valve tried to save the art style by tweaking the lighting from night to day, but neither looked right, and I'm still amazed they took the drastic step to completely reboot all the visuals and game universe. But if you think about it, it kinda makes sense, since Deadlock might be the first actual Valve unique IP set in a completely new universe ever since Half-Life. Leave a comment with a lemon emoji if you watch this